that occurs along with acute and chronic cholecystitis or choledocholithiasis, meaning the bile duct. So if you're trying to code a cholecystitis that has choledocholithiasis with it, then you're also looking at 574.3, aren't you? All right, so this type of excludes note tells you that you've got to have this other code along with it, or excuse me, in lieu of it. For example, this note under 575, this excludes note, it tells you that 575.0 is not assigned for acute cholecystitis when cholelithiasis is present. Instead, 574.0 should be used instead. Does that make any sense? All right, so 575.0, when it goes along with maybe cholelithiasis, then you're not going to use the 575.0. Instead, you're going to use the 574.0. It's a checking mechanism, helping you realize you're in the wrong place. Now, there's a second type of exclusion note, and this is when you've got two conditions that are similar, but actually have entirely different codes. A good example is when you've got a condition that can be either acquired or congenital. So if you happen to look up the acquired code, it will say excludes that is congenital. When you look up the congenital version of the same thing, it will say excludes that is acquired. All right, now let's take a look at the example that they want to give you. Or better yet, let's start at the beginning and let's look up diaphragmatic hernia, because that's a real good one. So you're looking up diaphragmatic hernia. What's the name of the condition that we need to be looking up? Hernia. Under hernia, we go to diaphragmatic, and we see diaphragm, diaphragmatic. And we're going to look first for the congenital diaphragmatic hernia. And what code do you get for that? Congenital. We go to code of 756.6. Now, before we go further, I want to throw a little helpful hint in there. Do you remember last week when we looked at the chapters and we saw how we have a whole section for congenital anomalies? Do you remember that? Well, I don't expect you to remember what code range was assigned to that, but flip back to the page, I think it was page 5, and tell me what code range is assigned to congenital anomalies. 740 to 759. Oh, then I know that if it's a congenital anomaly, it's going to have to begin with which code number? A 7. Why? Because all congenital anomalies are coded in the 700 series. Now, when you look at diaphragmatic hernia, if we knew that we were looking for a congenital one, then wouldn't we, if we remembered that piece of advice, wouldn't we know that we'd be looking for a 700 code? Yeah. And likewise, if it was an acquired hernia we were looking for, wouldn't we know that that wouldn't be a 700 code? Because acquired means after the birth, later in life. So is that a helpful hint to you if you can just remember the range of codes? All right, so we've got a diaphragmatic hernia and we found the code 756.6. Now let's look that up in the tabular. 756.6 plainly says an anomaly of the diaphragm. Oh. But notice that within that, it also includes a congenital hernia, and there's a colon, which includes diaphragmatic. So are we coding or are we classifying in that one? Kind of classifying, aren't we? Because the title of the code says anomalies of diaphragm. So we had to realize that a congenital hernia diaphragmatic would be included. Now look at the excludes note. It excludes a congenital hiatus hernia. Well, wait a minute. What is a hiatal hernia? It's a diaphragmatic hernia, isn't it? So there you had to remember your medical terminology to know that we were one and the same. And it also plainly tells you that if it's congenital, it goes to one place, and if it's, I'm sorry, let me back up. Here it's talking about a hiatal hernia versus a diaphragmatic hernia, hiatal being a specific type of diaphragmatic hernia. But it's telling us that it excludes the congenital hiatal, that'll go somewhere else. So an excludes note is helping you figure out what is right and what is wrong. Now let me give you another example, because that one wasn't what I thought it was going to be when we looked it up. Let's take a look at, give me a code for a diaphragmatic hernia that's not congenital. All right, let's take 553.3. Five 553.3. That's what I wanted you to see, and I thought we were going to see it on both of them. It's going to send you back, but it doesn't. 553.3 is a diaphragmatic hernia. It excludes a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, which sends us right where we were. So that's when the excludes note will tell you that you're in the wrong place entirely. You need to go to this other place. Sends you somewhere else. Excludes notes are trying to send you somewhere else if the circumstance of your diagnosis is the same as what it's describing. All right, code first, underlying condition. The entire code book has been developed according to disease etiology. E-T-I-O-L-O-G-Y. Did I spell that right? Etiology. What is etiology? It's the cause, isn't it? The cause. All right, so everything in this book is really based on the underlying condition. For instance, if I have a diabetic cataract, guess what gets code first? The diabetes does. Because the diabetic cataract is a manifestation or something that has happened as a result of the underlying condition, which is the diabetes. Would I have had a diabetic cataract if I had not had diabetes? No. Now, because a diabetic cataract is a special type of cataract that's associated with diabetes. So we code to the underlying condition. Now, you're going to get that quite frequently as an instruction. An example of this, take a look at code 484.5.